Welcome to the Sheldon and Lewis show. And we're here tonight with Daria Woodside, with whom I worked for some time in Pittsburgh when I was there. And we're going to talk about an esteemed teacher of mine, Sonny Richards. And he was an amazing man. And I'll turn it over to Daria
Whoa.
to say whatever she wants to say.
Oh, you want me to talk about so where do I start? I don't know.
Well, talk about
Uh
when you met Sonny.
when I met Sunny, you had a session with your patient. Sunny came and you invited me to sit in, and Jason was also there. Jason came, and there were probably four or five of the more wealthy women that you were treating at that point who were in that session. And I remember Sonny came in and he sat down and he chain smoked. He never stopped smoking. And we were in the hospital. And there was no smoking in the hospital, and he didn't care. And he was just chain smoking and chain smoking and chain smoking and chain smoking. And he sat for about maybe 2.5 hours. It was a long time, just talking about himself. He just talked about himself. He just told his story. He told about what being a Lakota medicine man had done to his marriage, about his brother, about he just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked about it himself. And I was highly disappointed in the beginning. Um, I thought, what is this, man? This guy comes, he sits here, he chain smokes, and he's just talking about himself, and I don't know what I wanted. I don't know what I wanted, some rattling or some, some drums or something. I don't know. But he was just talking about himself. And then at the end, he said, so all the medicine I just gave you is in the story that I just told you of my own life. He said part of this story was for each of you. And if you think about it, you'll find something that I overcame or that I did that will help you in your in your journey towards wellness or whatever. However he put it, he didn't put it in those words. So then I thought about that, and then I said, okay, this was a medicine story, right? He told us a medicine story. So then that afternoon, he was pairing people up. If I don't know if you remember that, Lewis, or not, he paired people up to tell them each other's stories. So I think that actually you had a little bit to do with this with me. But anyhow, at some point, there wasn't, you said, there wasn't enough. And Jason, not everybody can be with Sonny, or, they don't want to be with Jason. Would you go and be with Jason? So I said, okay, I would go and be with Jason. And we had to tell each other stories, and we had to sit and face each other and tell each other stories. And this was shortly after my yantra garden had been burned down to the ground, that I had had the fire. And so I told Jason this story about everything that I had gone through, building the garden, creating the garden, and then of course having the fire, and the garden being burned down, and that it had been a sacred site. Well, then Jason almost cried, and he told me his story about how he had gone to prison for desecrating a sacred site. And so it was this really profound experience for both of us. For him to meet someone who had been a victim, and for me to meet somebody who had been a perpetrator. So, that was my first day with Sonny when I first met him.
Wow. So I can provide a little history of how I met Sonny. So, from since I extracted from my mother through the use of medicinal wine, the possibility of my father being a man named Frank, who was Lakota in Rapid City, and having confirmed that with the guy on my birth certificate who didn't prove out with DNA testing to be my father, who told me
Mm,
that probably Frank was my father, I went looking for my father in South Dakota with the help of Kurt Kaltreiter,
mm.
who was a
I
Lumbee.
remember Kurt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so Kurt took me to meet Sonny. And the rest is history. I spent years, with Sonny and working with Sonny, and I never found my father, by the way, but
Mm,
but I found Sonny. And
mm,
when Sonny died, of course, Joe Tioni. Um, but that was how I found Sonny, was through Kurt Kaltreiter, who wrote several books. I hope they're still in print. He's now crossed over to the others.
oh.
Yeah, yeah. And Sonny had his entourage, Jason James and the Miller brothers and some other people whose names I can't remember. And we just started hanging out and going to ceremonies and bringing him to Pittsburgh and then later to New York
Mm,
and sending people to him in South Dakota. And we had that amazing um, thing where we convinced U.S. Steel to buy land for Sonny to do ceremony on and live on. And we set it up through the Nature Conservancy with the requirement that there would always be, the house would only be for a Lakota healer,
mm,
and the land would be perpetually preserved for Lakota healing. And so Sonny occupied that space for many years and did vision quests there, and he shared the Sundance responsibilities with Joe Tiona on the Cheyenne River Reservation. They worked together as
mm.
intercessors until Sonny died, and then it was just Joe. But so I was with them for many years, more than 20, and I carried Sonny's altar buffalo skull on my back in Sundance for some years. And it's here with me in my house now, the
Ah,
buffalo skull from his altar. And it's a powerful being that I
I bet.
appreciate, you know,
Yeah.
taking. Yeah.
Well, I stayed in touch with Sunny after we left New York for probably the first 2 or 3 years I was in Louisiana, and then somehow we lost touch. I don't know how that happened, but we did. Um, but he did stay in touch with me, for a while after that, and was very concerned about me actually being in Louisiana and being in that energy down there. And I remember the first thing that he said to me when I went down there was, "Well, you better make friends with the trees down there because those trees are not your native trees. They are not your medicine, and you're in a strange place. And the first thing you have to do is make friends with the trees." And I remember that very clearly. And then he was very spooked by hoodoo, and he was, "No, don't be getting involved with the hoodoo while you're down there, and don't be." There was a lot of fatherly um, kinds of things, And um, one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing while I was in Louisiana was studying the mounds, um, doing Reiki attunements on the mounds, doing Reiki through the mounds, being with the mounds, because Louisiana has probably the most mounds left in the United States. And at the time, they hadn't been mapped. And I made a friend who was uh, she worked next to the archaeological. She was a folklorist, but she worked next to the archaeologists. And they decided to map the mounds while I was down there, to map all the mounds that were left. And so she knew that I was really interested, and they wanted somebody to test the map and to, to be the first besides them to go and tour the mounds. So I actually made it to every mound in Louisiana while I was down there. And I had a lot of experiences, a lot of good experiences, a lot of positive experiences. But Sonny was also like very fatherly about that. And he cautioned me like, don't go up on those mounds and invite them to take over your energy. You have to be very careful. And he was telling me how they had people who had done that out west on the mounds, and the spirits that came in were so powerful and so difficult that they couldn't deal with it. They had to take them to South American shamans and deal with the South American shamans. Those were the only ones who could do anything with it. I never had any experiences like that. I only had positive experiences. But he was very concerned about me being in Louisiana. He was very fatherly and very don't do this and don't do that, and a lot of cautionary kinds of things when I went there.
So
Uh,
what do we know about the origins of Sunny? I mean, I don't actually, it's funny, having spent years with him, I don't know much about his early childhood. I know that he put in 20 years on the police force in Rapid City and and then retired and lived on his pension. Um, but I don't know much more than that. I mean, one of the things about being in Indian country is you don't ask questions. And so I don't know much about Sonny. Do you know much anything more than that?
I know that his work was very difficult on his marriage. He talked about that. He
Mm,
talked about that the first day, about how difficult it was for his wife, for him to do that work, because he brought people home. He brought people, his way of healing was to bring them to live with him.
right.
And not everyone was well. And of course, as you know, even like Jason, he went into the prisons a lot to do work. And so it wasn't easy on her, apparently, and not always something that she wanted him to do. That much I know. I
Mm,
remember him telling that, and telling how difficult it was.
right. And I know Jason was an important helper for him, but I don't know how they met.
In prison.
Oh, okay. Jason was in prison.
Jason was in prison.
Okay.
Yeah. Jason was in prison. That was that first day when Jason told me that story. He had been in prison, and Sonny was going and I think doing ceremony in the prisons. And he in spirit told him that he needed to take that Jason was important, that he had to train
Wow.
Jason under his wing. I remember him telling me that.
And I do know that Jason is alive and well and doing important work in Alberta now.
In Alberta.
Yeah. Which is where he was from. He was from Alberta. Yeah.
The last I heard of Jason was he had finished some training in social work or whatever. He was a social worker, and he was working. on one of the reservations somewhere. That was the last I heard. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I didn't know he had gone to Alberta.
I think he was working on reservations or reserves in Alberta.
Okay.
Social worker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
then
he felt really, I know Jason felt really strongly about that a lot because of what Sonny had done for him.
mhm,
That was something that Jason had told me that, because I remember saying to him, that's like a lot of really well-paying job and, it's kind of rough work. And he's like, no, no, Sonny saw me, helped me, so Sonny influenced him deeply, I think.
yeah, yeah. He and I had conversations too.
Yeah,
Well, we all benefited amazingly from Sunny. I mean, I did. And
I did too.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes it was hard to sort of tease out what Sonny was doing to make us feel so much better. But he did it in his way, as sort of his energy medicine.
I felt like Sonny saw more in me than I saw in myself. I think I had that experience with Sonny that he saw me as being more capable with my energy work with what I could do than I saw myself at that point.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really felt that from him. And I was thinking today because I knew we were going to talk about this, and I was remembering. Remember, we rented an apartment in Shadyside. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
And Sonny was there, and he was talking to all the ladies. And you never knew what he was going to say to them. He would he they were all these very nice, very rich kind of Squirrel Hill Shady Side ladies. And I remember Sonny's sitting there at the kitchen table, and he's smoking his cigarettes, chain smoking, always chain smoking. And he looks at this one lady, I can't remember what her name was. He called her by her first name, and he said, hey, so and so, do you masturbate? And this was just like ra- randomly out of nowhere. And and the conversation went on from there. But after a while, everyone was kind of like shocked and stunned by this statement that they never expected to come out of his mouth. He caught my eye, and I was sitting like on a sofa across from the table, and there was a woman sitting next to him, and she had a brain tumor. Lewis, you may
Andrea.
remember her.
Andrea.
Yeah, no, not Andrea.
Oh,
An
not
older,
Andrea. Okay.
no, no, an older lady. She was an older lady, not Andrea. Anyhow, she had a brain tumor, and Sonny caught my eye, and it was like, in my head, it was like, watch, right? Like he looked at me like, watch this, and all of a sudden, she lit up, literally, like her aura just lit up around her, and there was a black spike in the side of her skull, like you could see it, a black spike in the side of her skull. And suddenly he just reached over and he went like, oh, I think you got a fly in your head. And he just grabbed like this, and he pulled that spike right out of her head. Everything, all the light faded, and he just looked at me like, la di da da da. See that? And I think about that so many times. Not that he pulled something energetically out of her head. People do that all the time when they're doing energy work, but that he lit her up to show me. And I don't know how he did that.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. I don't know how he did that. I don't know how it was like, watch this. And it was like he turned on the lights, and there was everything. And I could see it very clearly. But to this day, I don't know how he did it.
It's all, so much of what I experienced in with Sunny is still a grand mystery to me. It's a great mystery. How did that work? And and I read that book by Vine Deloria Jr. about the way things were. And so many things happened in the past that nowadays seem impossible. And I don't know what to make of that. Is it because we've lost our connection with nature? Is it because we just aren't trained from birth to do these things, to melt matter and refreeze it? I just don't know. But um,
I
so,
don't know, Louis. When I think about it, I think about the fact that I was able to see it. He was able to make me see it. So there was something in me that was able, that had that ability, right? He wouldn't have. He he recognized that, and that's what I'm saying. He recognized more in me than I knew in myself, right? And but somehow he recognized that he was going to be able to show that to me, and
yeah,
that I would see it, right?
yeah,
And so I don't know, maybe it's memory, maybe it's things that we've forgotten, you know.
yeah. Well,
Mm.
I know when I first met him, I told him my story of trying to figure out my identity. And his response was, I already looked into you and you're fine. So cut it out.
It's funny. You
So
know,
you know,
Louis. Oh, sorry.
he told me you were the real deal, Lewis,
Mm.
because you were, because you wandered from place to place, that you were the real deal. That's what he told me.
Wow.
Mm.
How about that?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that first story that you told about how he was telling these stories about himself, and then he explained basically or offered that the stories were medicine,
Yeah.
and that is such a straight line to your work, Louis.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not where you were then, right? That's
No.
not where you were. But that's what he was about in that, at that time. Yeah.
And that's where I went, probably with his guidance.
With his guidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he was quite convinced that I should stop trying to figure out origins and just be me, and that I was fine and I was okay. I was whatever I wanted to be, I was. Yeah. Well, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, he saw you as being the real deal because you weren't rooted, really. You know, it was your lack of roots at that point that he felt was really the evidence that you were doing what spirit wanted you to do. He talked to me about it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he never told me that, but that's
Mm.
nice to hear. Yeah.
The Uwipis were, for me, incredible. I
Ah,
loved the Uwipis. I loved them.
yes. They were amazing. Furry creatures ran across your hands and water.
Stones flew around your head,
Yeah. Yeah.
lights everywhere, spirit everywhere. I
Yeah.
remember the night that we were in the church on in Shady Side in the basement, and the skulls rolled in. I don't know if you remember. There was the sound of these. Then he said that they were old Revolutionary War soldiers that had died in that basement, and their skulls came rolling in for blessing.
Yeah.
But that night, um, he like I just got surrounded by spirit, and they took off the top of my head. Like literally, it felt like the top of my skull came off, and they were poking my brain. They were just like poking my head all through my head, and then they turned me inside out. Like everything that was inside was outside, and everything that was outside was inside. It was like my whole vision flipped in half, and then came back, and then they put my skull back on, And then Sonny said afterwards, well, the spirit looked at you and they said, you said, they said you're pretty intelligent. I was like, well, okay. They were poking around in my brain. And that's when he told me, he said, you can be a Lakota medicine woman if you want to be a Lakota medicine woman. Spirit said that you can do that if you want to do that. And he told me that night. And, of course, I didn't make that choice. I made that choice to stay with Swamiji, which was the right choice for me. But I always wonder what I missed if I had gone with Sonny. I always wonder what Sonny would have taught me if I had gone that path.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the same thing. If I like had been able or wanted to immerse myself with Sonny and just be with him constantly, what could have happened?
What could have happened? That's right.
But I wasn't in that place. I mean, I had family obligations and other things that I worried about. So it just wasn't something I could do. But I've always wondered what would have happened.
Me too. Me too. And maybe that, because somehow he's never left me, Lewis, right? Like, even though I have Swamiji and, I live here in the ashram and I've made a serious commitment and taken my diction, I've done all those things. There's still part of me that always, oh, I wish I could ask Sonny that question. Or I wish that, there's always part of me. And then I think, well, maybe I can journey and go meet him. But somehow he's not there. I don't know. Maybe he's gone, or maybe I just haven't tried hard enough. But there, like you, there's this, oh, what did I miss by not immersing myself more with him? There is that feeling.
Well, I think that's sort of the difficulty is to be like well, I don't know what the word is, but I'm just going to use a bad choice to be a real medicine man or woman. You have to immerse yourself on the reservation with the teachers, and that's all you do. And I could never do that.
I guess, we're all too afraid. How do we survive financially? What do we do? I mean, it takes a leap of faith and, a release of debt or whatever. I don't know.
Well, and many of them don't survive financially. I mean, that's the reality
Yeah.
of life in capitalism. I know we were taking people to healers. They were like, we don't need any more blankets. We need cash to pay rent.
Yeah.
And so we came up with ways to give them cash, and then the plastic medicine man people started criticizing us for charging for ceremony, and we were like, well, they
Gotta
need
eat.
rent. They got to eat. No one's like, it's not like the old days where the tribes supported them. That's not happening.
Yeah.
And if people want healing, they've got to contribute. And the way we contribute today in capitalist America is with money. Like, if you've got 40 blankets and you can't pay rent, like, what good is that? So so there was that, and that was part of the way we supported Sonny for years. I mean, is through people paying, but we were doing it through a nonprofit, but they were paying for the experience and we were giving it to Sonny. And that was keeping him going. And I mean, morally, I think that is good, that it was right, even though I was criticized for it.
There's nothing wrong with it. He needed to survive, right? He needed to be taken care of.
He did. He needed to survive. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And wasn't like the old days where the tribe would take care of him. That doesn't happen. Like there's no taking care of medicine people.
Well, there
Well, maybe there is in some invisible way. I mean by the government, or I mean by the tribal government.
Sheldon, did you ever go to Philadelphia for a lodge with us?
No, I didn't. We did one in, was it Trenton? It was
So yeah, somewhere around there. It was
somewhere in
Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah, yeah, and it was wild. Well, I was there with my with my wife and my two kids, and my younger son, who is, shall we say, quirky. Um, I don't think his diagnosis means much for this conversation, and my older son, who likes to feel like the normal one in the family, and we're sitting in the lodge, and my wife Sheila is militantly anti-smoking, right? So Lewis is passing around the pipe, and Ezra and Sheila are sharing this pipe of tobacco. And I said to Ezra, who was then, I think it was in college, I said, among the things you thought you would never do with your mother,
with smoke.
yes, sit in the lodge and smoke tobacco together.
That's funny.
And I mean, it was a tough night because Zach had a hard time, but stuff got raised by spirit. But I think there was something very healing about all that, about sort of breaking the family norms, and like you, I mean, we've lived in ashrams, and also we are very involved with our Jewish practice, and I think it's always been hard for our kids, particularly the older one, to figure out, like, can we just be a little more normal here?
It's no fun.
Like my mom's wearing a bindi and my dad's wearing a yarmulke. It's like, come on, guys, like, let's go to Little League, which we did plenty, but and then Lewis was kind of like the icing on the cake. Let's tip this whole thing over into not your normal family experience, and I mean, that, like you, I mean, that was so much more of who we are, that I think it was really phenomenal and phenomenally healing.
Well, Lewis, did you learn to do lodge from Sonny?
No, I learned to do lodge from Marilyn Youngberg.
Okay.
Of course, before I met Sonny. I carried stones for her for years. And it's another story that I've told a few times, which I was at a conference in Nashville, Tennessee with some other people, and we were invited to go to a lodge at the farm in Somerville, Tennessee. And we thought, oh, that'll be fun. And so we went down there, and they were planning to put marijuana in the pipe. And I said, we don't do that. We do. He said, we don't. And they said, well, fuck you. And I called Marilyn. I said, Marilyn, this is what happened. What do I do? She said, look, the stones are hot. You know what to do. Ask the forgiveness to the spirits for whatever mistakes you make. The stones are hot. They need to be used. Do it. Lead it. And so that was my first lodge leading, and I made a few mistakes, but
who knew? They were all high.
Yeah. Gone girl. Well, none of us in the lodge. All the farm people disappeared, and only the people that I brought who came with me from Nashville were in the lodge,
Mm.
the non-marijuana section. Yeah. But that was how I started doing lodge. And I don't know, that was after many years of helping Marilyn.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, do we have any more stories about Sunny to recount?
You know, there were things that Sonny told me that I didn't understand until years later. You know, like it's hard to come up with examples right now, but you know, he would say things to me like, "Well, this is what you're really going to do," or "This is, you know, this is what's going to happen," or whatever, and I would be like, "Yeah, okay," and you know, 10 years down the line, it was like, "Oh, yeah, Sonny told me that." You know, so he did have that vision, Lewis. He did have that vision of looking more fully into people's, you know, future. I think the thing that, you know, the most, maybe most profound thing um, for me was Sunny, and was the combination of what happened with the Sundance before 9/11 and with Swamiji at the same time. After that Sundance was contaminated, and you know all the story of what happened there, Sonny called me on the phone from North Dakota or from South Dakota. He called me and he said, "You better start praying, and you better get all your people to start praying because something terrible is going to happen to America." And he told me that the dance had been contaminated and that all the elders were saying something terrible was going to happen to America. At the same time that that happened, I knew you were going to dance. I knew the dance was going on. And I had written to Swamiji the week before that all of you were going to be dancing and to, you know, for blessings and prayers and everything for safety. And Swamiji was having his star birthday that weekend, which is different than his birthday. And there were about 50,000 people in the ashram in India. And while this was happening with the dance, because this was before Sunny called me on the phone, Swamiji walked out of the ashram, left 50,000 people behind, went out to his birthplace, a place called Mehdatu, where there's a river, but actually there's three rivers come together and these huge rocks. He walked out into the middle of the river and started offering water to the sun. And the whole time he's praying to the sun, he's going, "Poor America, poor America, poor America." And he kept begging the sun and he kept praying to the sun. So simultaneously, kind of both of them saw what was going to happen. Sonny called me. I got you know, a picture sent and an email and stuff that Swamiji had done this, that he had gone out and said this and done this. So that happened simultaneously, and before 9/11, I had a dream that Sonny and the Miller boys and you know everybody, the whole gang, and all our Veda boys and Swamiji were all marching up this big hill together to do a ceremony. And when Bear came, I told you about his nephew, right? When Bear came here and we were talking, Bear told me this story about, I don't know, I think it maybe was Sonny's brother, his father, um, or another uncle, maybe it was Golden Eagle, one of the uncles, right? I don't know which one it was, had collected all these Buddhist monks and Hindu monks and all of them, and they had all marched up the Butte and done ceremony together, that it had actually happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I always felt, and I still feel, even making the choice that I made, that somehow our lineages are intertwined. Even though his was Lakota, and Swamiji's is Indian. There's an intertwining. And when I first met Swamiji, there lived as Red Indians together here on this land where I'm living here before. I mean, that was the first thing he told me, that he and I had lived here together as Red Indians. So I think there was a Native American history in the past, right? I think there was that. But I believe, for me, that we all came together in that way, in that time, for that reason, for everything that was there. I remember walking through the streets of New York City with Sonny, and Swamiji had given us a mantra to chant. And I was like, you got to pray, we're going to chant this mantra. I'm going to do this. And he was looking up and he was like, look at these canyons, these canyons that humans have created. And he was telling me about a Lakota prophecy about when these steel canyons were created, or that disaster would come. And I remember that was the last visit before 9/11, when he was there. And we were walking through the streets praying for the city with him. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Well, I don't know what more we can say about Sonny. I mean, just that he was an amazing person.
And we miss him. I miss him. I've never stopped missing him, honestly.
Yeah. And so much of his early life is shrouded in mystery for us. We don't know what happened and or how he got to be where he was. But he was a powerful dude.
He was an elk dreamer, right?
Yes.
And his brother was an owl dreamer. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother worked light and dark, and I remember that. He told the story about, and you wonder who trained them, right? Who trained them?
Know that Frank Foolscrow was involved because Sonny took me to meet Frank Foolscrow a few times. And so that Frank Foolscrow was one of his teachers. And he certainly was a powerful dude.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, whatever, he was the real deal.
He was.
So.
So thank you for the stories.
Yeah. So we're probably ready to stop the recording, and it's been fun and great. And
yeah, thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity. So
thank you.
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.